Alrighty, we are recording.
Thank you, Maddie. Okay, it is 1:01 p.m. on June 9th, 2025. This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board. I am Janet Hurley, the chair, and I will ask other board members to introduce themselves as I see them on the screen here. Sarah,
Present?
you are
Sorry,
muted.
you're gonna have to do that again.
Oh, sorry. Sarah Had, board member, present.
Thank you. Kirsten
Kirsten Sultan, board member present.
and Brooke.
Brooke Dingledine, board member present.
And we are absent Alex Weinhagen, who may be joining us further into the meeting, so stay tuned. But for now, we have 4 board members present. That is a quorum, so we will initiate our meeting. First on the agenda, are there any changes to the agenda? Sarah,
I have one.
thank you.
We need to remove environmental court docket number 25-ENV-00026 from our agenda.
Okay, we will not be discussing that during executive session. Yes, we will make that change. Or actually, we need to vote on it. So
I think.
can you make that as a motion?
I move to amend the agenda to remove our environmental court docket number 25-ENV-00026 from the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That was 4 ayes. All present voted in favor of removing that from the agenda, so that passes. Thank you. Do we have any public present? It appears as we do not.
No one at 10 Baldwin, no.
There's something in that chair, but it's not a person.
That is my bike helmet.
Oh, okay. So consent agenda, review and approve May 29th, June 2nd, and June 5th meeting minutes.
I move to approve all 3.
Thank you, Sarah.
Second.
Seconded by Brooke. Thank you. Any discussion? Everybody's good with them, eh? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Again, that was 4 ayes. That was unanimous. Thank you for approving the minutes. Next is studies and reports. I have no update from our last meeting with any of the work that I am spearheading. Sarah, do you?
Just I'm starting to get some good questions coming in for Tier 1A, which is excellent, and I look forward to more.
Okay, thanks. Actually, I did get a couple of comments from some regional planning commissions. And basically, they ask us to provide guidance around the issues that statute is either unclear about or offers conflicting information about. In particular, the way that it refers to planned growth areas as potentially encompassing centers. And my impression is that what we should do is that if a regional planning commission wants something to have the center designation, that it should use the downtown or the village center land use categories rather than planned growth area category. And if there is area around one of those centers that meets the planned growth area category, then use that as well. But that whatever area they want to identify as center should be categorized as downtown center or village center. So that, yeah, that's basically my solution to the problem that statutory language sort of presents to us in the RPCs. Any comment or questions about that?
No, other than I think that we have to work with the legislation that we've been provided. There might be some need or desire in the future to propose amendments to clarify, but that's perhaps the best we can do working with what we have this time.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and Brooke, do you have any updates?
Getting ready for our meeting on Thursday at Vermont State University Randolph campus in the Langevin House. We're sending out an RSVP with our agenda to try to get a clear idea of how many people are going to be in person versus online. Just so that for planning purposes, in case the folks there involved would like to break into groups. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but we will decide as we go through the matters. We're looking at case studies of the last two housing projects that went all the way to the Supreme Court to get an idea of what happens when it goes through the court process. So because just looking at numbers in and of themselves doesn't always provide enough context for really assessing how we can help. What is it that's causing the delays or the long time frames with motion practice and all of that? So Peter Paggi was wonderful. He provided some information from the zoning case and also had his own timeline of how long the process took all the way through the Supreme Court. So I really look forward to an interesting meeting on Thursday. We anticipate a lot of participation, and then we'll be looking at the actual models that so far have been provided so that we can start talking about those. And there's no limitation. We're accepting other ideas, of course. But these are good starting point models to be able to discuss the components, the standards of review, and how we can really reach the goals of trying to find a more expedited process if possible.
Thank you. Any questions for Brooke? And Alex, as we noted earlier, has been at least delayed, so we don't have an update on tier 3, unless Pete maybe has something that he could add.
Yeah, nothing further from since last week.
Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the discussion on the draft wood products manufacturers report. Just in time, here's Oliver. And Oliver, you are just in time. We are just getting to the draft report for discussion. I am going to share screen to get our latest version up on screen, and let me know if you see that.
Yes.
See it.
Okay. Kirsten.
I was just going to share for everyone's benefit that since the discussion on Thursday, I have not received other feedback from the public or a stakeholder group member or FPR. So this is just a continuation of review of the draft content, that has otherwise been under consideration.
And I'll just add that we did make some changes on screen during our meeting last Thursday. And the version that you see on screen today reflects those changes that we made on the fly during our open meeting. So, Kirsten, you had one comment on the executive summary.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that one word be added here in item 1. Second sentence, this would include availability of the minor process, 1-to-1 application, bag ratio. Fourth line down, availability of the Stony Brook mechanism to limit jurisdiction, in my opinion, would be better, more accurate to say to effectively limit jurisdiction. So the way that precedent is set up, it's still, one parcel or tract of land that's under jurisdiction, but then there's the sub project area that's defined that then informs future amendment jurisdiction. So it's clumsy to explain it and word it, but I think by adding the word effectively, we would get at something more accurate.
Uh-huh. Okay, thanks. I added that in there. Brooke,
How about using the word define? I mean, I'm not sure.
instead of limit jurisdiction, say define jurisdiction,
Not
define
ju-
the
I'm
limits
just-
of.
I'm just not, I mean, it's like, when we say limit, are we talking about physical boundary kind of thing?
Yeah, I think we're
versus
talking
like-
about geographically.
Yeah, versus like we're limiting our jurisdiction. I just
Yeah.
don't want it to sound misleading.
How about geographically limit or limit geographic jurisdiction?
Defining the limits of the jurisdictional area or something like that.
Oh, maybe effectively.
No, and take out effectively. I don't think going this direction, we need that. To
Oh, I see what you're saying.
mechanism to define the area that's gonna be, under jurisdiction is what I think we're trying to say. To define the area of the parcel under jurisdiction, maybe? Does that sound right, Kirsten or Allison?
Here's what it says now. Availability of the Stony Brook mechanism to define the area under jurisdiction.
The
Does that-
portion of the portion of the tract. It's like to be under jurisdiction.
The physical area, is that,
So could also
Yeah.
say the project area.
Or,
I think it is
Yeah.
sort of portion of the tract.
Yes.
yeah, I can propose them. I can look at the case law, but we keep talking about is the physical scope of jurisdiction, one of the appeals
Yeah.
I'm working on.
I think the terminology in the decision is the permitted project, quote unquote.
Yes,
And we use that
for the permanent
terminology further in this report too, I think.
How about portion of the tract?
The
We could
Regulated by the
use
permit.
The WPM project area, we could use that language that you have later in the sentence.
mechanism to define the WPM project area under jurisdiction.
I don't like.
We're losing the portion.
Yeah.
Well, we could agree to further wordsmith this instead
Okay.
of trying to do it now, but you
Yeah.
guys understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, and
Sure.
Allison suggested she would look at the case law maybe to help find the right wording.
Great.
yes, happy to do that.
Okay. Anything else on the executive summary? Oliver.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We had a suggested revision to point 9 in the executive summary. I could share my screen if that's the easiest way to show what it looks like, you know, the current language and the new revised language. I don't know if I have the privileges to do that, or I can read it if you prefer, Chair.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and read it.
So there's some text that we would strike, and there's some text we would add. So the revised version of point 9, which as evidenced later in the report, talks about A&R taking a step that the board feels is outside the scope of the report. The revised version reads as follows. The first part is the same up to the first comma. Explore extending exemptions to forestry and logging like those that are available for farming under elevation 2,500 feet. And then from the comma, everything that's part of recommendation number 9 would be struck, replaced with what I'll read right now.
Okay.
Provided that existing permit conditions that restrict land clearing related to commercial, residential, or industrial development projects, comma, that do not restrict forestry operations, comma, are not invalidated. I can read that again or again share my screen.
No, that's okay. I think Oliver, what you should do is send that to Kirsten. And I don't think that land clearing is the proper term here because
Sure.
we are talking about, you know, a prohibition for tree removal in certain areas of a project area, that to meet conditions that protect either things like a riparian buffer or a deer wintering area or a view shed, an important view shed. So land clearing, I don't think is the right terminology, but if you send that to Kirsten with comments, she can take that under advisement in between getting this out to the public.
Sure, I can do that. You know, and our key point in response to that is we have no objection to those types of permit conditions, but they just don't apply from our perspective to forestry operations, which is a term defined in statute. So, you know, those types of permit conditions, such as what you mentioned, riparian buffer protection, certainly apply to conversion, development, land clearing, whatever term we want to use. But they don't apply to forestry operations, which is sort of the whole point of us making this point and arguing for a clearer exemption here. But anyways, as you suggested, Chair, I'll send that language to Kirsten and we
Okay.
can proceed.
Thank you. Any other comments, Brooke?
Yeah, I was wondering, I guess I understand a little bit better from what Oliver just said, but I guess I'm trying to understand, I mean, absent just a blanket exemption, what is it that Forest Parks would like to see? Because I feel like we keep debating this language thing, and I'm not understanding what their goal is. Or Oliver, are you trying to say that forestry and logging is not constrained by an Act 250 permit that says don't cut these trees? Are the trees in the area under an Act 250 permit that are a buffer or for aesthetics or whatever, are they up for grabs for forestry to go in and log it, even though it's a buffer? Because that's what I'm not understanding. Are we trying to reach a different goal?
Yeah, what we're saying is for sites under 2,500 feet, you know, our understanding and those of the committees that have jurisdiction over FPR share this understanding with us is that forestry operations are exempt from Act 250. What's happened in practice is that there's been Act 250 permits that have been issued on sites maybe where historically logging hadn't been done, and those permits had conditions which then effectively restricted logging and forestry when the landowner sought to initiate those activities. And that's just one example. There's other examples as well where this has been problematic. And so the whole purpose of this recommendation is to sort of put forestry on par with the agriculture sector, which has very specific language around exemptions of agriculture below 2,500 feet for Act 250. So I think I'll stop there. This is a recommendation that I think the board, based on language further in the document, has said that, you know, it's from your perspective, it's outside the scope of the report, but you don't have an objection to A&R, FPR taking this up with the legislature. And I think, you know, if that's the board's position, we will accept that language and try to do just that in the subsequent session.
All right, so that just, and I appreciate all that you've explained, but let me just put it to you for me to understand a real world example. So if my property has a buffer because, you know, I have something the neighbors would have an unsightly view of that was considered undue adverse, whatever, and we did mitigation to create an aesthetic protection. Is that area of my property, could I call a logger and say, cut this whole, you know, go in and clear cut?
No, because there's other regulations that govern forestry operations in the state of Vermont, such as the acceptable management practices, such as the heavy cut rule. So you can't just go and cut willy-nilly. You have to cut subject to other existing regulation, which is what governs forestry operations in Vermont.
Right, but nobody's going to look up an Act 250 permit and say, oh, we can't cut any of these trees here because they constitute an aesthetic buffer. Is it right? Is that what I'm hearing? You're not constrained by the Act 250 prohibition to cut that buffer.
Well, I'd have to think about that a bit. I don't quite fully grasp the example, but I think, to be clear, what we're seeking through this point in this discussion is the exemption for forestry operations from Act 250 permit requirements below 2,500 feet.
Existing ones, right?
Well, that's the term that you used, that the board used in this report. So for the purpose of how this recommendation is worded, yes, existing. But I think we would argue that the same exemption would apply to future situations as well.
And we do reference future situations, but I still think we're talking at cross purposes here to some degree, because for the example that Brooke gave, you know, say she has some sort of slightly industrial use on the property she's talking about that is unsightly to a residential neighbor. And that project got an Act 250 permit. And as a condition of that permit to prevent undue adverse impact, aesthetic impact to that neighbor, one of the permit conditions was that there's an area where trees cannot be cut. And so what she's asking, I think, is, do those best management practices, it sounds like maybe not, would that require the forestry plan there to be aware of that Act 250 permit condition, and therefore that forestry plan for that property not allow cutting there?
Yeah, again, I'd have to think a little bit more about that specific example. I think the definition of forestry operations has certain requirements around, you know, size of the parcel and the area in which it's taking place. And so if you're just thinking of removing a few trees in an industrial area and those trees are protected by Act 250 for aesthetic reasons, that's not really germane to forestry operations as I understand it. And so that doesn't feel applicable in this situation. What we're trying to say, you know, again, similar to agriculture, the whole purpose of this recommendation is to put forestry on par with agriculture, is that when there's permit conditions that restrict pure, as defined in statute, forestry operations, that has proven problematic to landowners in Vermont. and that's the exemption that we're seeking, such that they would not be governed by existing permit conditions, and that the statute governing forest sector would apply. And so I think to the example that you cited, I don't believe, protecting an aesthetic buffer in an industrial site would be considered forestry operations as defined in
Well,
statute.
I think the idea is that that's a much larger site than houses just the industrial site, but maybe there's an area near the site that if you were to cut down those trees, it would reveal that site to a neighbor, let's just say. So we're talking about, maybe 100 or 200 acre site where there's a smaller industrial operation on the site that could be visible if not for some trees.
Yeah, and I think oh, go ahead.
From my position, when you subject your property to Act 250 and obtain a development permit, and you say to get over prong 3 of undue adverse impact in Quechee, I'm going to build this, or I'm going to preserve this area of the property. From a philosophical standpoint, and it doesn't even matter the particular situation, I have already known and accepted that I'm getting a permit that runs with my land. And now so this notion of there are amps and there are, ways in which forest plans operate and all that. But the bottom line is you've already used it for something else. And if you have requirements, conditions that says this is going to remain like that unless you come back and get an Act 250 permit, then cutting those trees is a violation of your permit. And regardless of whether the activity is in and of itself exempt, it's not, and what we're trying to ensure is we're not upending existing permits and conditions. That's where I'm coming from, in my opinion, about it. And because this isn't a hardship, this is something that a landowner has already chosen to do in developing their property.
And I would extend that to future decisions by that landowner to apply for an Act 250 permit and be subject to future conditions, not just existing. Kirsten, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to echo Oliver to be clear that the draft report puts forward a board position that, yes, the board supports such an, declaratory exemption, with the very important caveat that it does not vacate Act 250 obligations, past or present or future. I mean, it's still the reality that Act 250 projects sometimes encompass limits on tree clearing to meet the Act 250 criteria.
Yeah, I think we see this issue a bit differently, and we don't have to keep discussing it. I think we've been going somewhat back and forth on this. We have examples of landowners who are enrolled in, for example, a use value appraisal, and have had both forest management plans, forest legacy, which is an easement program plans, that when an Act 250 permit on the same parcel was established with certain conditions, got in the way of proper forestry operations. And I'm not talking about removing trees that are serving as an aesthetic or riparian buffer. I'm talking about more significant, doing forestry where forestry should be taking place for anyone that wants to manage their land in that way. And if it wasn't for an Act 250 permit, would have been able to take place. And so that's this from the feedback that we've gotten, our own observations. There are examples where the Act 250 permit conditions are perhaps unintended or limiting forestry operations in a way that conflicts with the intention of other governing statute in Vermont. So I think that's what we're trying to address here. And there's, my understanding is there was a decision that went all the way to the Supreme Court about some number of years ago about the the extent to which Act 250 applied to different sectors, and after that decision came out, there was sort of this blanket exemption applied to agriculture. So I don't think the type of conditions that the board is recommending here for forestry operations is something that under statute is acceptable in Vermont. And I apologize, I don't remember the specifics. I was just doing some reading about this over the weekend. So I think what FPR is seeking is a similar blanket exemption for forestry operations, and recognizing that in the existing statute for governing forestry would likely prevent the under a forest management plan, at least would likely prevent the removal of that visual or riparian buffer. So we don't, I know we're taking a lot of time with this point, but I think this is a situation where I think we've done our best to articulate our point. We'll try to send the comment in writing as earlier requested, and we'll see if that is more effective or not at influencing the board's position.
And just to respond, I don't think it's, a waste of time to have spent more time talking about this, Oliver. It's a sticking point, and I think we're interested in trying to resolve it. Brooke, go ahead.
Yeah, and Oliver, maybe we should look at the cases that you're talking about with the inconsistency or the challenge of now being prohibited from doing forestry where it should happen. Whether we can get an amended permit, they could get an amended permit, or to maybe even look at Stowe Club Highlands to see, is there a fix or an opportunity to give this some thought? You've heard what I'm trying to protect, and I don't think it's a complete overlap. I think it's a Venn diagram, and we can try to look at those. Obviously, we're in too much of a time crunch now, but I would be happy to put some thought into, but I don't understand well enough about what the challenges of those are. So please, I would like to invite you. I'll certainly be interested in taking a look and seeing if there could be another fix.
Sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Brooke. All right. And I won't go through this in as much detail as I did last time, explaining sort of some consolidation and reorganization. But if anyone has comments on specific other sections, can you share them now? Kirsten, you had one comment about some wording in the conclusion.
Yeah, the conclusion has this sort of errant word. This was the sentence that was added during the meeting on Friday.
okay.
Yeah, I can see it's highlighted, but that,
Oh,
it's like 2/3 of the way down. Yeah, let's review DB working, but yeah.
is that it?
Yeah. Mhm,
Okay.
found it.
Oh, here's a little space problem too. Okay.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing the revised language on the minor permit process. We were looking at some of the numbers about this recently in the forest products sector, and since 2018, I think around more than 28% of the wood products manufacturers' applications have been processed as major applications, which is compared to about 25% before 2018. And I think if you look at the similar time period for all other categories of Act 250 permits, only 5% were processed as majors, and the other were either AAs or the other 95% were AAs or minors. So that's, percentage-wise, there's still a much higher percentage of wood products manufacturers that are being processed as major compared to other sectors, other fields of application for Act 250 permits. So I don't have strong thoughts about what to say. I can't say that the minor process is not working satisfactorily, but I think if that's the language that the board chooses to use, I'm okay with that. But we might want to highlight that there's still a much larger percentage of wood products manufacturer applications that end up being processed as major than other fields, and maybe a goal can be to try to bring the percentage of wood products manufacturers applications that are treated as majors down closer to other sectors.
Thank you, Oliver. Can you include that in what you share with Kirsten?
Will do.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments on the draft report? Brooke?
Yeah, just on the minor, you know, I mean, the problem that we have is the N number is so teeny that, you know, percentages, when you compare, you know, hundreds of applications to 14 is not, I mean, I understand, sure, we want to provide them that process, but, you know, we're talking about 3 majors and 1 got abandoned, so there were 2 cases. And, you know, so it's really driven by the circumstances, I think. So I'm not sure that I agree with like the goal is to keep them a minor. I mean, due process does come into play. So I think we've tried to look at that, but I'm just not feeling that statistically it's the way to look at it necessarily. But I appreciate certainly the desire to get folks in that easier process or keep them there.
Okay, any other comments on the draft report? Kirsten, do you want to explain what the plan is for this report going forward?
So we've got the public meeting next week in Randolph. And we have issued a press release making it known that the public can attend the meeting to provide comments or submit comments in writing through the 20th. So, Oliver, we haven't really discussed much a game plan to get this to the very finish line with, you know, submittal to the legislature. Happy to kind of have that conversation now, but I think it was envisioned earlier that after the public comment opportunity occurs, we will assess if there's any, you know, depending on the scope of it, if there's any need to regroup with the stakeholder group to get input on response to the public comments before the report is finalized. So I would think that's still the plan, to just all, you know, get together. I'll be in contact with FPR, and then also, you know, of course, we as a board will be, you know, in parallel, taking a look and seeing what edits may or may not be warranted. So I know we've got some board meeting dates on the calendar for the end of June, shortly after the 20th. So I think that's the plan, is that we will on one of those dates be making a final content decision and saying this is the final content, and come up with a cover letter for submittal to the legislature.
And Kirsten, since there is only 10 days between the 20th and the date that this is due to the legislature, you think you have time to convene stakeholders in FPR? And
well, I was envisioning that if the stakeholder group if the scope of it is such that there's something substantive that really should go back to the stakeholder group for input, that if a meeting is necessary, that would occur on Teams. And yeah, it's going to be a very quick turnaround if that becomes necessary. And then in the meantime, I would envision if I receive comments, I'll forward them to, you know, FPR and the board. So just sort of informationally, so at the next discussion opportunity, everyone has the benefit of that information. And I'll disseminate whatever comes in.
Oliver?
I'm open to suggestions for how to get this to the finish line.
No, that all sounds good. I think, yeah, I agree with the chair that it'll be tight to convene another stakeholder group meeting, but let's cross that bridge when we get there. One thing I was wondering about, Kirsten, is the report website clearly mentions the public meeting, which is great. And I assume for folks, if folks want to attend that meeting remotely, and if hybrid is an option, you'll add a Teams link to the website. The question I had is there, will you also add to the website how guidance or how, yeah, just guidance on how folks should submit written comments if they've reviewed the draft 2, or maybe if there's a forthcoming draft 3, if they reviewed that and would like to submit written comments, how to do that. I didn't see that on the website. Apologies if I missed it.
It was in the press release, and maybe we can, I think if you're looking on the homepage of the website in that sort of right-hand box that says sort of like what's new, maybe we can add some language there. But the meeting agenda, I don't think has been published yet, and that's where people will find the link to participate on Teams at the meeting. So maybe we can try to get that agenda set sooner than we might otherwise do, so that everyone has those instructions well in advance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
and
that's a good idea.
Yeah, we have it roughed out. It's just not final and published yet, but we can make that a priority, I think, if everyone agrees.
Yeah, and I do note now at the bottom of the wood product manufacturers report website, it does say comments and contact. So you can infer from that that comments on the report should go to you. We might want to update that, just say, if you want to submit written comments on the report, send them to Kirsten by this date, just so that people know exactly what to do and
Yeah,
when
the
to get them in.
20th. Yeah, it was on the press release with that date, but we can add it there as well. That's some good feedback too. Thank you.
Hey, anything else on wood products manufacturers? Okay, operations, budget, and legislative updates. Pete.
Hey, good afternoon. Not too much. I'll go through it quickly here. First item, just so the board's aware, and you probably received an email on it already, but the employee engagement survey has been released from DHR. That gives us a little weather check on how we're doing and opportunities for bettering the program based on employee suggestions and feedback. So that is due at the end of the month. The other thing I was going to mention quickly is S-127 has gone to the governor's office for approval or veto. But generally during that period, the various agencies and entities will reach out with their comments and suggestions. The finance and management team has reached out to us, Janet, myself, and Rachel, for any feedback there. The board's previous decision had limited our involvement in this type of matter as just relating to the appeals update. Remember that this housing bill has the increased timeline or faster timeline for the appeals study, and also includes the review of the impacts, the fiscal impacts to the board as well for that. But any other, I guess what I'm getting at here is if there is anything beyond that, the board that under S-127 that the board wanted to let the governor's office through finance and management to be aware of in that bill, happy to transmit that information. But again, kind of the starting point here was not to have other comments, so we have just kind of left it at that.
So just to clarify, I think all we really need to say is,
Sorry,
we
yeah.
have no,
Oh, sorry. Can I just jump in and say that normally the bill review, I don't know this particular form, but that would normally be executive privileged for the governor's office, how you're advising them on pending legislation is normally something that has some protection under state law. So before you get further into how you would advise, I wanted to flag that. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit in an executive session.
sure.
Yeah,
Um,
typically that's how we'd approach it while we were more closely connected with the governor's office.
I think we can talk about that more in executive session.
Okay. Operations, anything, Pete?
Nothing other than what I've mentioned. Yeah,
Okay,
just that
anything
engagement
from
survey.
Rachel?
Yeah.
Nope, Kirsten has a question.
Pete, can I ask a follow-up question to the conversation about the two coordinator positions, east-west, and the current plan or maybe preliminary plan to use up the roughly 1 year remaining of the limited term funding to have a candidate fill that position and then later make available the permanent classified position opportunity through the regular hiring process. But
Yeah.
opening up the possibility that short-term position candidate could potentially move into that more permanent position. My question is, sorry for the wordiness here, when the short-term position is advertised, can that advertisement make known that it's expected that there will be this future opportunity for a permanent classified position so as to probably better attract, robust set of well-qualified applicants? You may get a different responsiveness if it's a position that's only going to be available for 8 or 10 months versus one that would be a permanent position.
Yeah,
But-
with any HR constrictions potentially in play, but yes, our intent would be to post it as such and say that there is the potential for an opportunity for classified position.
Okay, so that
down
can
the
be
road,
put
so
right
that-
into the job listing.
Yeah, I think that's our
Okay.
intent. Yeah.
I think that's an important
No,
detail.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, good question.
Anything else? Rachel, you probably don't have anything?
Nothing further to add.
Thank you. So, communications and public outreach. Sarah, did you have anything on that today?
Sure, I have a couple of quick things. The first is I did hear back from the SOV CAM, which is the State of Vermont Communications and Marketing Team. And it says it's open to executive branch employees or associated board members. Work to be part of this group, more of a networking and peer learning space. They're happy to have one of us join them, if perhaps as needed. And I'm happy to open that up to the rest of y'all, or happy to join myself to help inform some of the communications planning that we're doing. But wanted to sort of first take a pulse of the board on that and see if you would be okay with me. Seeing as how it needs to be one of us, it can't be one of our employees. I think it, are you okay with me joining that?
I am. Kirsten's
All right.
nodding. Brooke's nodding.
All right, okay.
And Alex isn't
I'll-
here, so we don't
I'll-
care.
I'll
Thank you,
sign
Sarah.
up for it. So I have a draft plan and I forwarded it to Pete, and I'd like to catch up with him tomorrow just to make sure that I'm synthesizing everything okay, because it has internal, external communications. And I've heard a lot of great feedback already from the board in terms of looking at, we do have stakeholder MOUs, which would probably help govern some of the way that we communicate with them. I have gone through and created some internal communications guidance method and tools, employee engagement, and roles for all of us, as well as public participation and engagement, and legislative testimony inquiries. I think Pete provided some good framework that we already utilize. I'm going to include a small section about handling complaints, as well as how we inform other board members. I think Alex had raised the question last week about when we're asked to do presentations or inquiries are made directly of board members, how do we keep everybody in the loop? I'm trying to keep it to 5 pages right now. It could easily be more. There are some good community engagement plans, which are our public participation plans, which are many pages long. But as I said, I think I'm looking at this as an interim stopgap. So I'm hoping by the end of the week, maybe to get a draft out to the rest of the board, and perhaps under our agenda setting, we can talk about some time in future weeks to discuss the draft, and I'll get that out to you guys.
Great. Thank you. Any questions or comments or input for Sarah on communications?
Look forward to seeing the draft whenever you're ready to share it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for all your work on that. I know
Yeah.
you've been at it.
Yeah,
for a while.
thank
Well,
you.
Thank you, guys. I think it's evolved as you guys have given feedback, and I know that there will be more, and I welcome it, and it will continue to evolve, and we'll hopefully move forward with something that's inclusive.
Sarah, are you envisioning this as something that would inform our EJ public engagement plan obligation, or would be part of it? Are you thinking about that at all as you work on this?
Absolutely. I'm looking at this
Okay.
as being a stopgap until we get a true public participation plan that's a lot more detailed and wide ranging. But I think for right now, to recognize some best practices as well as a formal state policy on environmental justice is important.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Suddenly we're ahead on the agenda, and we have come to discussion and possible action on appeals enforcement and attorney-client memoranda.
So I would move that the board find that premature general knowledge of confidential attorney-client communications would place the board at a substantial disadvantage, and move that we enter into executive session to have these communications.
You.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kirsten. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous of the 4 members who are present. So we will exit this meeting for a while, and when we finish executive session discussion, we will return before adjourning. Thank you. We have a recording in progress. And we have our four board members present. Alex was unable to join us today at all. And we have nothing left on our agenda and no deciding points from our executive session. Brooke,
I would move to adjourn.
thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Kirsten. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. See you
Thanks.
soon.